Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session in the Group of 100 PwC Digitising Finance series. Apologies for the technical difficulties that we've had just there, but just shows you the challenge of digitising in this modern world. I'm Martin Roberts. I'm the Joint Deputy Chair of the Group of 100 and Group CFO of Ramsay Health Care. The Group of 100 is the representative body of today's leading CFOs with the purpose of creating better businesses for tomorrow. For those of you able to join us for the first two webinars in this series, we covered digitising finance teams and finance function transformation. In today's session, we'll focus on emerging skill gaps and reskilling the finance team of the future. It's pleasing to see how the G100 membership is embracing the series, and I'm really looking forward to today's session. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, whose ancestral lands and waters we work and live on throughout Australia. We honour the wisdom of and pay respect to elders past, present and future. I'm pleased to introduce you to our host for today's webinar, Sam Lobley. Sam is the national leader of the PwC Australia CFO Advisory Practice and head of the G100 Future of the Profession Working Group. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Martin, and welcome everyone, and especially welcome to those of you who are in Victoria, and hopefully you are looking after yourselves and are safe and well. Apologies for the slight delay in starting the event. As you can expect, we've had to rapidly take the event fully virtual, and so that caused us a few technology challenges at the back end, but thank you to the PwC technology team, and thank you to all of you for your patience. So we've just seen in the opening video the skills that are required for successful finance functions to evolve from the traditional finance professional to teams that are more strategic and more agile in their thinking. And also the roles that employers play in supporting the growth of their teams. So as Martin mentioned, this is the third in a series of webinars focused on the future of the finance profession. And at the last session, we heard from Matt Young at Treasury Wine Estates and Sushma Segal from QBE about their own organisation's finance transformations. And whilst each finance transformation journey is unique, there are some common themes throughout. And those themes are around people, process, and performance. And so today, we're going to dive deeper into the people aspect of the finance transformation journey and really dig into the skills that are required for successful finance teams of today, tomorrow, and in the future. We're going to hear from different organisations about the different choices you've got around how to adapt and evolve traditional learning pathways. So we're moving away from short-term, tick-the-box, compliance-led training to more lifelong learning. And hopefully we can say goodbye for good to the 6-week full-time classroom learning that myself and many other accountants had to go through over 20 years ago. So we've got an exciting mix of perspectives today with us. We've got Helen Souness, who's the CEO of RMIT Online, Ryan Hansen and Lisa Cockrell from CSL. So Ryan is the head of finance and control at CSL, and Louise is the HR business partner for finance. And on the panel, we're also going to be joined by Emma Hardy, who's an expert in this space and sits within our people and organisation team at PwC. Helen's going to share with us the emerging trends within learning development and some of the new and innovative thoughts that RMIT Online are developing. And Ryan and Louise will share their own perspectives around the journey that CSL has been on and is still on as they seek to modernise and transform their finance function around the world. After we've heard from them, we'll open up for a Q&A panel. And for those of you that have been with us on previous sessions, you'll know that the Q&A panel can really provide some rich and in-depth analysis, but it really relies on the quality of the questions from you all. So please do your best to provide questions as we go. You can type them into the text box during the session. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Helen Souness. Helen has got over 30 years experience working in and around the digital strategy and product space with organisations such as Lonely Planet, Etsy, Envato and Seek. And then most recently at RMIT Online, she's built a team of over 130 professionals to help support anyone who's interested in learning and developing their career, and to work through ways to innovate and successfully develop different learning pathways. Really interestingly for me, RMIT has partnered with local and global organisations to develop Australia's first content around topics such as 5G, AI, blockchain and Internet of Things. Outside of RMIT Online, Helen is also a NED for Sendle, which is Australia's first carbon neutral shipping service, and also Camperbuy, which is a marketplace for RV hire. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks so much, Sam. And thanks everyone for joining us today. My first slide, I think I'm starting with a truism that the future of work is changing. I think actually probably it's more appropriate to say the future of work kind of hit us like a bullet train last year as COVID hit, and every single business, every single government department, and indeed our own personal lives accelerated in our digital transformations overnight. We absolutely saw skills shortages before COVID hit. We were seeing many tens of thousands of shortages in various technical skills, but those shortages have increased. Our estimate now in the next slide is that we are lacking perhaps, lacking 156,000 pure technology jobs alone. We did a white paper late last year, just sort of as everyone had been in sort of COVID restrictions for 6 months or so, of 1,000 workers in Australia and business leaders in Australia. And we found that they believe 87% of jobs today require digital skills as well, that essentially everyone now needs to upgrade their digital skills. We also found in that survey that people's awareness of their skill gaps had gone up. We found 1/3 of workers believed that they needed new skills post-COVID, that through the year that was, they were requiring new and different skills. And 1/4 felt they didn't have all the skills for their job. So there was a much greater awareness now of skill gaps that indeed already existed, but have accelerated, and an awareness has increased that, that those skills need to be upgraded for all of us. So finance departments are no exception, as you all know, indeed the topic of this series in the G100. But it's really clear when we sort of analyse the finance department that there are a number of things that are highly likely to be automated or augmented in coming years. We look at any skill that is highly repetitive or structured. Even if it doesn't repeat, but it's quite a structured process. So you think month-end reporting, accounts payable, invoice generation, there's a number in a finance department. So we can expect, indeed, already seeing that a number of the traditional roles of a finance department will be some of the estimated, in one report I read, more than 7 million workers who will be impacted by 2035 with augmentation or automation. So what are the skills that a finance department needs in this rapidly accelerating world? I'm sure you have already experienced this, but we did some analysis in my team recently of the last 3 years of job ads of finance professionals, and there were some skills that we would have always expected. So strategic planning, strategic analysis was still there. The age-old, absolutely vital skills of every professional, communication and collaboration. Some people call them soft skills. I never do, because I think they're some of the hardest skills to get right. But those transferable skills of communication and collaboration came through really strongly. But there were some that we might not have seen even 5 years ago. We found fluency in programming languages such as SQL, Python, and R featuring strongly. Data visualization skills on platforms such as Tableau came through strongly. Risk management skills and problem-solving skills, again, some of those transferable skills still there. But some of those program and data analysis skills become very interesting. It's not just the structuring of data, which is extremely likely to be computerized or digitized in coming years, but the analysis and the insights from the data. Almost like a Clay Christensen, if you think of the innovator's dilemma, if you're a fan like I am of that work, where a business as its core business commoditized must move up the value chain. We see finance skills moving up the value chain from just production of data to absolutely insight. We all looked at that and went, well, that's not going to work for cybersecurity or agile project development or artificial intelligence, machine learning. I mean, it changes every 6 months dramatically. We're going to need to move our product cycles faster. So that was the first thing we started to do. We have developed new postgraduate programs, such as that accounting advisory program, within months. And really pushed the sort of speed to market that a university can move at without compromising quality. We get amazing teaching scores. The other thing we did is actually innovate the product. If you think about it, in a degree product, we know that a 15-year-old today will have 17 roles through their career and change industry 5 times is the estimates that Foundation for Young Australia has made. They're not going to do 5 different or 17 different higher education degrees to reskill as they go, as they become and absolutely vitally need to be lifelong learners, as we all need to be. So what does the product to help them upskill look like? It needs to look really different to the traditional degree. Not always. Sometimes a traditional degree is exactly the right product, but not always. Often you just need to upgrade in one area. Perhaps in your business, you're wondering how blockchain might help you make your department more efficient. You might just want to do the 6-week course we built in blockchain strategy. We built it with experts in the field in fintech and advisory. And as we do with all of these short, sharp courses that are built with industry, we essentially want to take the absolute gurus working in industry and work with them to create a wonderful learning journey mentored by people working in industry. So it's incredibly relevant. And by the end of that course, you've got an applied project in that new skill that you can take it back into your business. You've got a blockchain strategy, or you've got a project planned using more agile methodologies. Whatever it is, the product needs to change to meet the needs of this changing workforce. We still, however, of course, sometimes then stack these up, and this is the conceptual diagram you're looking at, stack these kind of experiences up to become, say you've done a couple of these short courses, well, look at that, you've already done a quarter of your postgraduate qualification, so you can stack those as you go through your lifelong learning journey into more and more qualifications, from your credential and short course through to full program qualifications. So we are all transforming our business, and we need to. The interesting thing on the next slide that we found also as a result of COVID was demand for learning these new skills has increased. It's really encouraging to see that 3 out of 4 Australians are actually interested in upskilling now in these areas of emerging technology that we all need to get our heads around to get the efficiencies that the Australian economy needs going into the future. So that's really encouraging. The interest has increased, and there's a real acknowledgement among the business leaders we surveyed that they believe they need to apply these emerging technologies. So it feels like appetite has increased as the awareness of the need for these digital and technical skills has increased. And the value of those, of an employer supporting people in their lifelong learning journey, was also really, really pervasive in these results. We found that over half, 54% of people, would prefer upskilling to free lunches at work. So we're all looking at the various benefits to retain our highly skilled teams. They'd prefer upskilling to free lunch. They'd also prefer a learning culture, half of them, over a fun culture at work. So really valuing upskilling. And 38% even said that they would prefer paid study leave over a promotion. So just a really high value and high interest in upskilling. How is that translating to the upskilling people are actually doing, though? This is where there's still a real dissonance. What we found is that only half of employees have access to employer-provided training. So that's half don't have access to employer-provided training. And only about 21% on top even get any subsidy for their training. So that's a big chunk of our workforces not being supported in their lifelong journey, despite being really interested in it and valuing it. So feels like a moment where as employers we really need to decide whether we're leaning in on this problem. It seems that there's still a lot of employers that would prefer to hire in new skills than to upskill their current workforce, even though we know, and we've seen so much research, I saw some recently that suggests that a wrong hire can cost as much as 2.5 times the salary of that person, versus if you have someone who's already in your team, already embedded in your culture, got relationships and great transferable skills already, just give them the technical and digital skills they need to upskill and be the knowledge worker you need them to be. It's there's still a dissonance and a gap there. Having said that, I'm very optimistic, and I see some incredible employers. I read a case study, not one of our clients, but Siemens, in their finance department transformation, doing some really interesting things, brought 30 digital workers into their team to just start pounding away on automating some of the month-end processes and other processes they believe they could automate. And our own client, Telstra, who we've worked with for a couple of years, they've spent, what was the figure? Over 25 million in their workforce transformation, and really very, very strategically analyse the skills they need for the future and how they will upskill their workforce. We, in particular, built them, for example, a course to move their network engineers who are used to going out kind of toolbox in hand and working on the physical network, and how to, we've built them a course with some of their gurus and external industry experts that will transform those network engineers into software-defined network engineers. So they are going to learn how to deploy their telco network remotely using software in the future, and the digital transformation of Telstra. And they're doing that right across their workforce now, using our product management courses, for example, for all their product managers, to make sure that they are preparing their workforce for where Telstra needs to go. It's really encouraging to see some of the case studies, because what we know more than anything, just to finish and look forward to your questions on the panel, but what we know is it's got to be a partnership. Everyone has to take responsibility for their lifelong learning journey. We should all be making sure our skills remain current and relearning and learning again and again as we proceed. But we also need our employers to lean in and help that journey, even if it's not just financial. A huge amount of the success we see in business students is that they get some support for their time learning. We build our courses very flexibly. They can do it with a full-time job. It doesn't necessarily even need to be work time, but it needs to be some support for the balance of work and life for your learning journey. And government too, leaning in to address some of these skill gaps to create the economy we all hope Australia will have in the coming years. So I'll leave it there and look forward to your questions. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for your comments there. And I suppose for me, there were some really interesting points around the recognition that these skills are absolutely required, and that these underlying technologies and topics have developed so quickly that the traditional course development time horizon is just far too short for the needs, or far too long, sorry, for the needs of the organisations and of our communities. And the last bit was interested that the team members were happy to take a learning culture over a free lunch. I'm not sure whether, I think many people would like both, but I'm sure if they have to choose, they'd go for a learning culture. Just before I hand over to Ryan and Louise, I know that some of the viewers have had challenges with the technology and the buffering, so apologies for that, and we will share a full video of this session at the end of the event. So yes, I'd like to introduce Ryan Hansen. Ryan joined CSL about 15 months ago, I think, in 2020, and is the head of financial control, reporting, and innovation, which is an interesting third part to the role. It's not often that finance, control, and innovation are all wrapped up in the same title, so it sounds like a fascinating role. And before joining CSL, Ryan was a partner in the audit practice at Deloitte, where he actually led the efforts in transforming their audit division. So I'm sure there's some really interesting learnings there. And Ryan's got a passion for organisational change and transformation, and that was, I think, partly why he chose the role at CSL. Ryan grew up and qualified in South Africa, and him and his wife Lynette moved over to Melbourne in 2008, where they've since settled with their 3 children and a dog. And outside work, Ryan enjoys keeping fit. I know he does half marathons from time to time, which is very impressive, as well as a bit of golf when he gets the time. And Ryan's joined by Louise, who's the global HR lead for finance and legal at CSL. Prior to that, she worked with some large tech companies, helping them develop their executive leadership capabilities across a range of functions. And Louise is actually joining us from the outskirts of London, where she is currently living with her husband, 2 young children, and a newly acquired puppy. So that's 2 pets in the team. So over to you, Ryan and Louise.
Thanks very much, Sam. And it was great to hear from Helen as well. So if we can turn to our slides, I'm going to really let Louise do a lot of the background around people development. But why don't I just describe to you around the journey we're on at CSL. So CSL has embarked on a finance transformation as part of a wider transformation of our enabling functions. And in that, we linked our finance strategy to our global strategy as a business. So CSL's nature and our underlying culture is one of innovation. And we felt that in the finance space, we absolutely needed to get onto the front foot and innovate and be able to really bring a change to the finance function. Now, I'm not going to take you through the finance strategy, but I will say that, these wheels that you see here, 3 of them were people related. We realized that the biggest thing is about transforming the way that our people experience their jobs, what capabilities we have, what skill sets we need for the future, and what enablers we as the business need to give to our people to allow them to be the best at what they do. We know that the skills they had in the past will need to be changed, but we know we need our people, and we need to retain the people that know our business and really get them up that curve. Like every good organization, we do have now a structure of business partners, operations, and centers of excellence. And Louise is our business partner in finance and has done an amazing job of working with us through this transformation journey. I'm going to let her take you through a few of the things that we learned during our finance strategy. Louise.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from me in the UK. So what I'm going to do, if we just move to the next slide, is take you through our approach, if you like, to our capability uplift, and just give you a little bit of an insight into some of the programs that we're rolling out. So needless to say, we built our learnings from industry best practice to help us create a framework to scope and really deliver this project and deliver the skills that we needed to ultimately deliver the transformation that we were taking our business through. So we started by, taking that industry learning and using that to help define our future capabilities. We then mapped those onto our current teams, and we're able to conduct then quite a detailed capability assessment across our workforce. And what that really did was help us narrow down and define where our priorities were. So under some key headings, we then had, you can imagine kind of like quite granular lists of what the key learning objectives could be up to those bigger subheadings. We created learner journeys for every single role across our finance organization. And as we mapped that out, you could see that in some roles, some of those skill sets were maybe more important or more critical for us to really get, moving behind a development program for them. Going from that then, what we started to focus on was looking at how we then implemented some of this development, and we've chosen to take a pilot approach so that we can make sure that we are, delivering the right training, that it's hitting the right notes, and that, our people are really looking for. Beyond that, beyond the pilots, we'll then obviously look at ways of scaling and really creating that continuous learning environment. For us, one of the really important pillars here is making sure that we create that ongoing learning environment. Some of the points that Helen was making, it's not just kind of like a go in, learn, and off you go, and we don't kind of revisit. We just expect you to know what to do. So if you could go to the next slide, I can demonstrate kind of where we landed. So we defined 5 core capabilities to deliver a best-in-class finance team. And arguably some of these capabilities, I think, are probably ones that we will use across our other functions as well. Starting with leading and collaborating with purpose. This was a capability set that we were able to draw from programs we already actually have across CSL. So things like leading through change and building high-performing teams. Moving along there, we've got the global value creator, and this is really around building that business intelligence, that critical thinking, that strategic global mindset, decision making, and creative problem solving. Moving down then, customers at the heart of what we do, fairly self-explanatory, and I'm going to use that actually as a showcase of how we are running our pilots. Digitally led, obviously a super important one there. Lots of what Helen was referencing in her presentation a few moments ago, in terms of how we change that mindset and also equip our people to use data and analytics to communicate in more meaningful ways to their stakeholders and customers. And then the last one, a focus on continuous improvement. So that's really driving that curiosity, that innovative mindset, and looking at things like change, agility, and resilience. So if we go to the next slide, I can show you a little bit around our putting customers at the heart of what we do. And this is really about, creating that customer focused mindset. And what I'm hoping I'm kind of illustrating here with this slide is kind of our approach. If you kind of look to the kind of almost the 2 or the 3rd and 4th pillars of this is the actual classroom learning. This is where the modules that we've picked is around storytelling and presenting and creating engagement and trusted relationships. Those are classroom training, but they are highly interactive, where we've got lots of practical engagement and a highly engaged kind of format of delivering the training. But that's really all we do in the classroom. If you kind of go back to the beginning of the line there, what we've done is we've gone out and told people why we think this is important. We have an executive sponsor for one of our FLT for all of our programs, and actually that piece is really led by them, reinforcing actually why it's important. We think that customer centricity and customer focus is important. We've then equipped them with some of the skills that will help them actually feed into that skill set. So business acumen. And really understanding kind of, their customers, where their customers are coming from. Then we put them in the classroom training. And then we've also done, you'll see at the final pillar there, is make sure that we have a infrastructure for our program delegates, that once they've completed that training, they can tap into a network of trained coaches. We've identified people that do this well within the business already. We've trained them as coaches, and also obviously in the program itself, so that we've got that network for our delegates to go back into, tap into, and keep driving that continuous learning, and really embed the skills that they've learned in the classroom. So if I go to the next slide. So this kind of just, gives you some of the key features of our pilot. So, what's been really important to us is making sure that we get the voice of the customer. What do they want, expect from us? And actually, what do we do well? What do we do well already? So as part of the training program, we've got videos and speakers from across the business to provide that context and perspective. The focus has very much been on practical actions and activities during the sessions, as I mentioned. And we use a variety of internal and external speakers. Real focus on that post-training mindset change. For us, we talk, as we've gone through this capability uplift, and we're still going through it now, there's been a real focus on this isn't just about going and learning something, it's how we change a mindset to a lot of this stuff, particularly around some of those areas like customer centricity and also, creating that digitally agile and dexterous mindset too. And then finally, we've put our FLT through this too, and we'll continue to put our FLT through it. We want to make sure that actually we're all using the same language across the business. And then I think my final slide just kind of, I guess, reinforces how this wraps into or folds into the whole development roadmap that we have across CSL. So what we've built in terms of our capability uplift has very much been within our finance function to support our finance transformation. But what we've continually done throughout that process is make sure that it maps back to our learning philosophy across the whole organisation, making sure that we are providing, experiential learning for people, stretch assignments, job rotations, for example, exposure. So, making sure that we've got frameworks for people to network and that we've got good, robust coaching and mentoring programs. Obviously, thinking about that environment that we create, and that's quite topical for us at the moment in terms of how we develop our capability uplift, in terms of how do we house this going forward, and what kind of learning environment, physical learning environment do we make for people to be able to constantly dip in and access this. That's obviously part of our broader kind of, education offering and how that maps into face-to-face workshops, but also e-learning, podcasts, lots of different types of stuff, recognizing that people learn in different ways and will want different stuff nowadays. And obviously wrapping that around with our broader ecosystem of learning and professional associations, etc. So yeah, hopefully that's provided you with a little bit of insight in terms of how we've tackled upskilling within our finance organisation as part of our transformation.
Thanks, Louise. And yeah, so we look forward to taking your questions as a CSL team. Nothing's ever the finished article. I think that's the other thing about learning, is that we'll continue to evolve, and things like Agile have made us feel a lot more comfortable with that. So that's certainly, getting more people into that space. It's interesting when you work in a science company, Agile is not naturally a thing. So we are sort of bringing a lot of transformation through that. But I'll hand back to Sam now, and we'll take the questions, I think.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Louise. That was fascinating. What was really, really interesting to me was how, given the CSL culture is around long-term relationships and really understanding the role that each team member can play in the organisation, it's pleasing that the learning journey is embedded into the culture and the time that you've taken to make sure that it feels right for CSL. Because as with any organisation, these things need to be tailored to suit the needs of the business. So we might move on to the panel. Conscious we did start a bit late, so we'll see how we go. We might run a few minutes past 3 o'clock if that works for everyone. And so we're joined on the panel. We've got Helen, Louise and Ryan, who you've met, and also Emma Hardy, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a partner here at PwC in our people and organisational team. She's got over 20 years experience working with a range of corporate organisations, both here and in the UK, I think including Aussie Post, BBC, some of the major banks and GSK. She's got a stellar career. One of the most interesting things that I think she just did was, as COVID broke, she stepped into the Chief People Officer role at one of the major Australian universities, which must have been a fascinating experience given the challenges that COVID has brought to that sector. And then, not to be outdone in terms of the number of pets, she also let me know that just before COVID started, she moved to a farm where she's now got an undisclosed number of cows, chickens, and dogs. So I think she's definitely won that battle. So we might start actually, Emma, with yourself. Really just keen to get your perspectives on what you've heard so far and how that fits in with your experiences from working with other similar organisations.
Wonderful. And thank you for that introduction, Sam, as well. And yes, we also have goats as well. But anyway, that's and a husband. So it's all in the menagerie. Thank you for inviting me on the panel today. And as you heard, I've probably had a bit of probably a micro career myself in the last probably a couple of years, with last year being asked to step into the CPO role at one of the Victorian universities, actually. So that was really, I think, as Helen alluded to, it's like being hit by a bullet train, essentially, and building those organisational capabilities to face into a crisis like that, I think, was quite an extraordinary front row seat to that. And as coming back into PwC, I'm also working on our internal employee value proposition for PwC and our consulting team, as well as advising our financial services clients around EVP and other kind of people matters. But I think the kind of biggest shifts that I'm seeing and have seen are really as we've emerged from what was crisis and we're emerging into this different phase, still a very challenging phase as we're seeing unfold real time. I think what we're seeing is people really trying to make sense of their environment through their learning and make sense of their careers and how we sit in this new environment, this new hybrid environment. And I think there's a really unique role that learning is starting to play within that, as it gives people signals around how do I fit into the organisation? How am I progressing? I think it also maybe to some degree answers this piece around why people might prefer learning to a promotion. I think promotions are quite relatively infrequent and finite, but actually I think learning has that opportunity to offer something a bit more longer term and immediate. I think also it holds hands with the career framework as well, and the careers that we've seen evolve and will continue to evolve, where we have almost these micro careers and this micro credentialing that kind of sits alongside this new kind of way of engaging in the workforce as well. There were some really interesting statistics that came out from a World Economic Forum report last year as well, about learning and the types of learning that people are digesting. So when they actually looked at the type of personal development that people were undertaking through 2020, it was things like gratitude, mindfulness, deep learning. And in 2019, and kindness as well, can't forget that. But in 2019, it was regression analysis, it was writing, it was all of these kind of much kind of harder skills, if you like. So I think the world of learning also gives us an insight into what employees are seeking. And so I think it's then important to think about what our employees need and also about what does the organisation need as well. So I think we're also kind of trying to work in tandem with just balancing those two. Well, hopefully not two competing priorities, but I think as Louise, you talked about, it's really important to get that vision or that pull so that people understand the why they're engaging in the learning that's being provided as well and why that's important. But I might just pause there, Sam, in the interest of time.
Cool, thank you. And sort of related to that, one interesting question that's come from the panel, from the audience, is what the view is of the I suppose the capability of graduates that are coming out of our major universities at the moment, and their expectations around, or their understanding of their knowledge gaps and their expectations around how they'll be met over the course of their first few years of their career. So I don't know, is that something we might go to Louise first, and then wouldn't mind Helen's perspectives on that as well, if possible.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we've probably touched on this in some of the comments that Emma's made and also Helen as well. I think the expectation of graduates coming out of university and into their early careers is very different to what we've traditionally expected. I think we've probably got a bit of an evolution to go through in the industry that I work in now, in pharmaceutical. If I look back to my experience in the high tech sector, I think we were there a couple of years ago, thinking about actually we have a completely different proposition, or we need to think about a completely different proposition for graduates coming into the workplace now, that is much more experiential, that's much more learner focused, that creates so much more diverse opportunity for them. And also expect that, to points that have already been made, that we're not necessarily looking at lifelong employees, right? We're looking at people who are going to come in, take an experience and move on. And we kind of have to get a bit brave about that. I think we've probably got there in other industries, but I think others will lag behind a little bit and will take longer to get there.
And Sam, did you also want to talk about sort of what's our view of the graduates that you're getting?
Yeah, it'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've learned, certainly at RMIT, we've heard industry loud and clear that the sort of ability to apply skills is so key, and the transferable skills like communication, collaboration, creativity are so key in our grads. So there's been a lot of work, actually. This is more on campus, where most of the school leavers still do attend university with RMIT. And there's now more of a portfolio approach for them to develop those transferable skills and evidence of their ability to apply their skills. So we're embedding things like Salesforce qualifications inside a Bachelor of IT, so that they can leave knowing how to administer a Salesforce campaign, immediately applied skills, as well as building credentials in the same way that online we can teach some of these core skills and we credential them from the university. We are making those credentials also available to our students so they can do agile project management, creativity, communication skills in an applied way with an assessment that then, if they pass, they have a badge, and it actually goes onto their transcript now at RMIT. So they'll have those transferable skills documented as well. So I think increasingly we think the future here is, that every grad, every worker has more of a portfolio than a CV of evidence of what they can do. Like, who cares? LinkedIn will cover the CV, right? We need to know what you can do tomorrow in the job. So more and more we're trying, certainly online, all of our assessment is authentic. It's a project. It's something you can show you can do at the end of the course. And I think that's the future of where education needs to go and how we help our grads evidence to you guys that they can do the job day one, or at least have some really useful skills. Maybe they're not the full job day one.
Cool, thank you. Hey, we've had quite a few questions coming in about the topic around how to actually get leaders to really, truly help their teams find the time and potentially the funding to do this learning. I mean, Ryan, given that you are often holding the keys to the budgets, I don't know if you can share any thoughts around how you can make sure that learning and development is appropriately funded, is an investment in teams, and it's something that has to compete with other funding requests.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's a continuing battle in organizations to make sure that we do treat learning and development funding just as much as we do with research development or ongoing costs. I think when you do make that relation back to what it costs you to bring a new person into the organization and skill them up, it's actually, the business case speaks for itself. So certainly at CSL, we take that very seriously in how much we put into our L&D investment. But I think that's still an area we'll need to continue to be very focused on as leaders, make sure that every leader does put a budget. I know for us, every leader does put a budget in for training every year for our teams, and we'll be sitting down with our teams this year, but what training they're going to do, working with Louise and others around what we're going to do as a finance function. So we have certainly invested in it. but it needs to be purposeful and can't be the first thing you cut off the budget when you want to get there, because you realize that'll cutting your face, but spite your face. So not a good idea. So.
And Emma, have you seen anything from other organisations that you think works really well?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we are, as a firm, grappling with the whole learning dynamic at the moment and how important it is, and how do you create space and capacity for people to learn. And so you're building it into strategy, into KPIs as well. We need to hold leaders to account to enable others to learn, put leaders through learning as well. We've heard the CSL example, so people actually are talking with a voice of experience, not standing aside from it. I think there's an important role for leaders to actually role model the importance of it as well, to engage their teams around it. Looking at the whole reward and recognition structure as well, to actually reward learning and progression through learning.
Yeah, thank you. And then there was one, again, specifically for the CSL team around how did you go about sourcing and developing the e-learning content for finance, given, I suppose, some of the topics will be quite specific to your organisation?
So it's if I take it first, I think so it's a combination of we've had some in-house material that we've been able to pull and reshape. We've partnered with external partners. We've been quite choosy about the partners that we pick. So we're picking people who are really innovative in their thinking and innovative in their delivery. And we've built some stuff in-house as well. We've just created it.
And is that,
we've got a pretty good learning platform that we use to sort of do our e-learning on. It's called Plateau. I'm sure it's got another background behind it. And in the previous organisation as well, these online platforms that we are developing are going to be really interesting. Some of them, when I was looking at my previous role, we were looking at one that had a artificial intelligence engine at the back end that could then go and search the internet for related materials that will then be pushing to the individual. So your learning is a continuous experience that you actually start to enjoy. I noticed the PwC digital learning app is also similar to that, where I actually quite enjoy playing with it because I can go and do things that I'm interested in. It keeps pulling me in. So I think those kind of platforms are going to be where we need to go to. And hopefully, to the point of cost, I think as a finance community, we're all investing in the same areas. We should start to work with partners that allow us to then at least develop this as a community rather than everyone doing their own bespoke thing. I think hopefully we get there, because that's the beauty of software as a service now, that we are able to now crowdsource that kind of development. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And obviously, the G100 as a body is focused on areas where the community can work, the finance community can work together. So it might be something we should pick up separately in the organisation.
If I may just add with that, because we're working with a lot of clients to try and, because actually often budget we haven't found is so much the issue. In fact, so many training budgets aren't used, right? In companies I've worked in, we sometimes say about our students, because they're working full time, they're often parents too, they pay in much more than money. It's actually time and sort of the energy, and so many jobs feel overwhelming already. It's very hard to carve out the time. So we've actually found the best success with people completing their learning is very executive sponsorship, saying, I'm doing it, you need to do it. This is part of your role this year, and we'd like to see the credential. And so a little bit of carrot, a little bit of stick of making it available, because it's sort of an organizational commitment to lifelong learning and role modeling that at the top. Because otherwise it's sort of, but I'm only valued for the work I'm doing, not my learning journey. And the risk is they never get to it.
Yeah, good point. Really good point. Another one that's just come in is around, this is for, I think it's for Ryan and Helen. It's for senior leaders in finance. So not just maybe we've talked a bit about graduates and immediate post-grad, but if you think about what are the key skills gaps that you've identified around the finance leadership team or senior leaders within the finance community, and are there different ways to make sure that learning need is being met?
Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I was going to say this earlier, that the graduates coming in are really smart around technology. I look at my team, how quickly they can whip something through a system with data analytics tools and the platforms and other things, where a lot of the senior leaders in finance, we just never were educated in that. And along the way, we haven't been able to pick up that skill. So I think there's going to be that micro learning for us to get up to the skill to utilize these tools. And the best senior finance leaders are actually skilling themselves up in that space. But we don't have to do it. We just need to understand it. I think our role is to then also help our graduates or younger people actually then be able to take the outputs of it and understand them. So I think the role of the senior finance person is obviously that insight that you get and the experience you have in taking that data and to teach that to your younger, less experienced staff earlier than you used to. I think in the old days, it was when someone was there, they were going to do AP Recs for 3 years, and they were going to do this and that and take 7 or 8 years to get through to senior finance. They can get through quicker. We can develop people quicker. So I think the skills of senior finance leaders is to now, how do we take the abilities of our younger people to use the technologies and do the things we can't do, but then bring what we do have as the skills of the analysis and the experience we built over the years and bring those two together. I don't think we need to all be good at everything. We need to bring our strengths and help develop each other.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. We did go slightly over, so we might start to wrap up with, if I go back to the very beginning of the session, we talked about, everyone on the panel has got some very different perspectives around the way to tackle this problem. So I wouldn't mind from each of you one key takeaway from today, and maybe something you've learned that you weren't expecting to. Might start with Emma, because you're next to me on the screen.
Thanks, Sam. Look, I think we've touched on this, and it is really the importance of learning and how it really is an ecosystem, and there's multiple levers that we need to put into play to support both communicating why it's important, building it into our strategy, building it into our kind of learning systems. I think also it's actually about thinking about learning in its broadest terms, that it's not just maybe that online learning engagement, but it's actually also how we can enable people to learn from others as well, and being aware that that is how people also consume information and learn and evolve and develop.
Louise, thank you.
Yeah, and I think leading on from that, a link to some of the stats and data that Helen shared with us, it's about, that continuous learning environment where we are providing that learning environment as employers, but actually actively engaging with our people and finding out what's resonating and what they really want.
Thank you. Then Ryan, and then we might finish with Helen's views.
I think one insight I have is that learning needs constantly evolving, so we need to keep on testing it as well. I think as events happen, like COVID, things are changing and we need to evolve. So we can't set and forget a learning plan. A learning plan needs to evolve with the changes. That was something I took away from today.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I guess I'm always on the lookout for how we really get everyone leaning into this upskilling challenge in Australia. The gaps we have are just not sustainable. And I loved in the CSL example, the coaching program you put in around it. I thought that was a wonderful way to reinforce the learning in a course, be it online or in person, with coaching and that coaching skill, because I think that's a gap for a lot of leaders. In my experience, my career, and one that is incredibly powerful for kind of activating everyone's development if we have a bunch of coaches supporting them around the business. I love that. That was my big takeout. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. And for me, I always feel amazingly inadequate when I learn about the different types of technology and learning that I've not been doing, but I need to get onto. But it also makes the profession such a fascinating one, and one that gives us all a really fulfilling career over 40, 50 years if we look after it and continue to learn. So that was my takeaway. And as we wrap up, I want to thank all of the presenters and panelists today. So thank you very much for your time. Really do appreciate the level of candor and sharing your perspectives. Also thank everyone who's attended. I know there were some technology challenges at the start, so we will be sharing a video of the session today for you all to dip into, and feel free to ask any questions of the PwC team over the next few weeks. The next session of these webinars will be running probably in early July, or we might defer it through to September depending on how busy everyone gets, but we'll absolutely be having something in the short to medium term. And finally, I just wanted to thank the G100 and the members of the G100 working group for their contribution, and to the many people at PwC who've helped make this happen, and again to our tech team who've helped move mountains to turn this event fully virtual in the last sort of 12 to 24 hours. So thank you all. Have a lovely rest of the week and weekend, and for those in Victoria, stay safe. Thank you.